So speaking of the leftist agenda, the Supreme Court appears ready this session to perhaps uphold a Mississippi abortion law that bans the murder of unborn children after only 15 weeks of gestation. It questions whether the law is unconstitutional as defined by the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973, which many of us would consider unconstitutional in the first place. Some on the court have argued that to overturn established precedent like Roe v. Wade would jeopardize the appearance of impartiality on the court, making it appear to be just another partisan political institution. But as the Western Journal's Randy DeSoto pointed out in an article just this afternoon, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh listed 8 precedents during arguments that previous Supreme Court decisions had in fact overturned, including some of the more famous ones, Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, which overruled a previous separate but equal ruling from Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, which allowed segregated facilities based on race. I don't think there have been too many people arguing that that overturned precedent was a bad idea. Miranda v. Arizona, 1966, required police to give warnings, the famous Miranda warnings about the right to remain silent. Gideon v. Wainwright, 1963, guaranteed the right to counsel. And then one that we might disagree with, but it still serves as a good example here, Lawrence v. Texas in 2003 overruled a case that was at that point not even 20 years old, in which justices had found the Constitution was silent on the matter of same-sex relationships. Lawrence v. Texas essentially granted the right for same-sex couples to marry. Again, overturning precedent. So there's plenty of precedent, it turns out, for overturning precedent. As Kavanaugh pointed out, and he said that's a list of 8, and he said he could go on. There are more examples of that. Now, I think it's important to note that even if the court overturns R. v. Wade completely, which is not a given by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a possibility here. But even if they do that, it would not make abortion illegal. It would simply return that matter to the states where it belongs. There's no reason why this is a federal issue. Return it to the states to decide. So, you guys tell me what you think. If the Supreme Court was to overturn Roe v. Wade or a similar precedent, do you think that makes the Supreme Court into a political partisan branch of the federal government? Would it, in other words, affect the court's credibility as an unbiased institution?
Well, would it affect the credibility? I mean, half of the country would assume that it's a biased political organization now. But I mean, that's not the case. It would be if they did reverse Roe, that's just them going back to neutral, like Kavanaugh's been saying, right? This whole time. There's nothing. The Constitution is neither pro-life nor pro-choice. He pointed out during the proceedings, and yeah, that would just return it to the states, where probably a good amount of states would make it illegal, a good amount wouldn't, and they would eventually. I think what will happen, though, is the left will double down on court packing. They will try to destroy everything in their path if they don't get what they want here. But yeah, I mean, they've lost credibility with half the country because half the country doesn't think anyone is credible. So that half being the left. So
yeah, it's really ironic to me, I would say, that Justice Kagan is bringing up the Constitution and she's talking about how important it is because the way that she rules is not constitutional at all. She thinks that judges should be activists and that they should put in laws that mandate things for the entire country. And that's not what the Constitution lays out at all. The Constitution is very clear that powers should go to the states, those which are not directly given to the federal government. And I think that is what would be happening here if Roe v. Wade was overturned. I was researching this topic so that I'd be prepared to talk about it. I was reading an article in Esquire, and they were talking about Brett Kavanaugh and this argument that, it'd send it back to the states. They're like, he's actually just deflecting because right now there are 23 states that have Republican governor and Senate and House. So those states would ban abortion. It's like, Yes, that's how it works.
How it's supposed to work. Yeah.
So they act like that's a bad thing. That's how the Constitution lays things out. So I just think it's really rich, honestly, that Justice Kagan is trying to lecture us about the Constitution when her ruling would be that she wants to make laws, basically set precedent that the entire country has to follow, which is not constitutional in any way.
Yeah. Michael, you mentioned court packing, which I really find interesting. The idea that, you know, in response to the idea that the Supreme Court has become politicized, what we want to do is make sure that we politicize it. That's the response. You know, get as many leftists on it as possible.